how on earth is like not everyone talking about this or looking at this first if you're dealing with a health challenge? Again, I was taking like thousands of dollars worth of supplements, and I could have stepped outside and probably got more benefit than all those supplements combined. I feel like out of all the stuff that I've done, I think this stuff responds the quickest. I feel like I see noticeable changes in like a week or two.
Welcome to the Wiser Than Before podcast, where each episode will get a little wiser. I'm your host, Josh Dodds. On this episode of Wiser Than Before, we talk about the health tip that's worth more than $1,000 a month in supplements with Dr. Jake Dodds. And no, that's not just fancy marketing language. Jake tells us how he was taking thousands of dollars in supplements, yet his health was still declining. In his search for an answer, he came across what's basically a health hack, and it worked better for him than all of those supplements combined. In the episode, we also cover Jake's 4 pillars for health, and he explains how things like supplements, nutrition, and diet only fall under one pillar, which means there's 3 other pillars available to you to improve your health. And in many cases, these other pillars are more accessible, cheaper, and easier to implement than something like a drastic change to your diet or even taking a bunch of supplements. Jake also gives concrete examples of what his busy family of 4 has done that have made the biggest impact on their health and how you can do the same. All right, Jake, welcome to the show. Good to have you on.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Definitely excited to talk with you today. Obviously, by background and training, you're a chiropractor, but we're going to start off the conversation today just talking about some of the health hacks and tricks you use in your personal life with your kids and your family. And one of the reasons I want to talk to you about this stuff is because I feel like you do, from what I see, it seems like you do a better job than almost anyone I know of making use of cutting edge, health info and studies and knowledge, but in a way that's not overwhelming. It doesn't drive you crazy. It actually seems like you use it for what it's meant to be, just to make your life a little better, help lead a healthier lifestyle, more happy, more calm. And I feel like most of what happens with this biohacking type of stuff is there's just an avalanche of information, and it's totally overwhelming. And people feel like they need to go research or read 3 books to know, how to implement something, red light therapy, light wave blocking glasses, filtered water, all this kind of stuff. And it's fun watching you and your family, because every time I talk with you, you've got something new you're doing, but it just kind of fits into your life, and it's in a more like holistic way where it just fits, and doesn't seem overly stressful. Like for me, I've got a list of like 10 of these things I'd like to do, but it always just stays on the to-do list because I never get around to researching it or knowing the best way to use it. And one of the things that got us talking before this episode is how I see wearing the light filtering glasses a lot, like filtering out the blue light from screens, and you're so consistent with it. And the few people I know who actually are aware of those things and use it, they use it here and there, but you've really like stuck to it and been consistent and seen good results. So I want to dive into how you do that in general with your busy life with work and kids, but still making the most of some of these health hacks. And we'll go from there. Can you start off by telling us a little bit about how you got into the light blocking glasses and how they've worked for you?
Yeah, of course. So just like you said, it has felt overwhelming for me too. And I think anyone who's trying to juggle all these different things feels like that at one point or another. So I feel like one thing that really helped me though was understanding the different categories that I was working with. And what I mean by that is because even in high school and stuff like that, I always felt like the health and wellness sphere called to me, and there was always something I was trying to do to, eat my healthiest, and what does that actually mean, and what's the best thing to put in your body. So my journey started where I think a lot of people's do, which is in what's called the biochemistry sphere, which is essentially what do you put in your body? So kind of looking at the body as that chemical cocktail. If you put the right stuff in, you're going to get a better output out. And that was a relationship I noticed really early, is like, hey, if I eat certain things, I notice my body feels a certain way. So that made sense to me. And I think probably 95% of healthcare or 90% of the conversations that happen in health and wellness are around this biochemistry idea. So are you drinking the best water? Are you eating the best food? Are you taking the right supplements? Or even more from that allopathic model, like if you're sick, you need to put the right medication in your body to make you better, to get that chemical balance right. So again, that's where a lot of the conversation in health and wellness has happened for a long, long time. And that's where I started. And obviously it is super important. So not to discount that. What caught me off guard is I think there's 3 other really important categories that just get completely missed. So I think a lot of people end up frustrated because it's like, I'm trying a billion different things in the biochemistry sphere. But what I realized for myself personally is I was trying to sit on a 4-legged stool while only working on one of the legs. So the next thing that really hit me and what got me into chiropractic is I had my own health challenges going on that were severely affecting how my nervous system was functioning. So much so I had a neurological event. I ended up in the hospital, couldn't walk, couldn't talk. I spent the next year and a half in and out of hospitals trying to find an answer for what was going on in that disconnect between my brain and my body. And nobody had an answer. I was at one of the premier medical clinics in the United States. I ran through a week and a half of their full range of testing and had needles poked to my nerves. I had imaging done, like I had everything, blood work, and everything came back negative. So the answer I got was, well, you might want to take it easy on exercising, and we're not really sure what's going on. And I was out the door with really no answers. So I ended up in a chiropractor's office. I was there for probably 15 minutes. He took some x-rays. He came out pretty quickly thereafter, put him up on the wall, and he's like, well, hey, this is how your neck is supposed to look. And he showed me your neck's supposed to have a curvature facing like a backwards facing C. And he's like, and this is what you got going on right now. And it was the curve of my neck was completely the opposite direction, which is usually what people see when people are like 60 or 70 years old, if they've had long-standing spinal issues and that kind of degenerative curve. So he's like, well, this is where your brain connects to your spinal cord. So I don't know if this is what's creating your issues, but I think this is probably a good place to get started.
So did you have, could you tie that back to an injury, or was that you were, born that way and just kind of developed, and then at some point in life, it created that neurological event, started giving you problems?
So in retrospect, and even just working with people in this space for the past 12 years, I think everyone's got a combination of bigger accidents and injuries. So sometimes it's really obvious, like, hey, I had a huge car accident, I had a really big slip and fall, I had concussions. So, and a lot of people even have like big obvious ones like that. I think there's some other ones that get missed. So I think a lot of people have some level of trauma during their birthing process that they don't really realize. So just for example, C-section, like a ton of babies are born by C-section these days. And the human babies have literally no stabilizing capability for their head. Like anyone who picks up a newborn knows the first thing you have to do is cradle the head, because if you don't, like their head is just everywhere. We're not born with the capacity to stabilize their head whatsoever. So the way the birthing process is supposed to work is you're supposed to go head first and the pressure is supposed to be downwards. A lot of people are born by C-section. And so a cut's made into mom's belly. Literally the head is grabbed and the baby is pulled out by the head like this. And we have absolutely no stabilization capability in that direction. So obviously it's important to get baby born safely, but it's not really considered of what kind of stress has just been put on the head and the neck, removing this baby from the mother in the complete opposite way that biomechanically we're designed to take pressure at that age. So, I mean, that's just one example. There's vacuum extraction. There's a lot of different ways that it can go. But I think a lot of people, like even just right out of the chute, do have some level of stress between the head and the neck. And then if you watch any, 2 to 4 year old for any length of time, you'll see falls off couches, running at full speed into a counter kind of thing. And those are things that we don't remember, right? Like we're kids, or anyone who's been at recess has seen the kid fall off the monkey bars on their back. And then everyone's like, oh crap, for 2 seconds. And then they pop up and keep going, So I do think there's things that happen, sports injuries. So between those, on top of the fact that the lives we live are very not kind to our spines. So we sit a ton, we're on the couch, we're in the car, we're in front of the computer, we're at our desk. So a lot of our lives are built in this hunched forward sitting position. It's not how the human body is designed to move. We're designed to be upright, locomoting on 2 feet, bending, squatting, going through dynamic motions. And a lot of us just don't get that throughout the day based on the lives that we live. So I think between those two things, it's cumulative over time, and I think a lot of people are dealing with that. So that was the case for me as well. I'd had multiple concussions. I played soccer forever. I had a big event when I was 9 where I was knocked unconscious on a water slide. So I think that was cumulative. I do think as much effort as I felt like I was putting into the biochemical space, I feel like there's a lot of things I was doing incorrectly. And then again, I think there's like 2 other baskets that I was just completely missing. So I don't think that was the structure. That was the only thing that was going on that created that big neurological event for me. But certainly, I feel like the position that my head and neck were in, we're putting a lot of stress on that junction between my brain and my spinal cord. And I do think it was making everything a lot more hyper responsive than it would have been otherwise.
Okay, so your posture and spine health, so to speak, sound like over time there were different things that happened that kind of added up and compounded. But it sounds like you're saying that in general too, like using this analogy of a 4-legged stool, the biochemical, the vitamins and minerals, and basically things you ingest. That's one thing that's more commonly talked about. But then your spine health was another, and it sounds like there's some other, maybe 2 more or even more areas of these, maybe not huge events, but little things that just added up over time. Is that the way you see it?
Yeah, and again, in retrospect, I see there's 4 big baskets that we all need to focus on for our health. So I think for me, I'm gonna call it structure being one of them. And this is the really foundational idea that gets missed a lot of times, but the human body is designed to operate in a certain position. And particularly that relationship between the skull, the spine, and the central nervous system. I mean, we kind of take it for granted, but literally it's what we live our lives through. So if we have those accidents or injuries, or if we've had that wear and tear, and the body is not able to hold itself in the correct position, it can affect a lot of things, including the central nervous system, is what I learned through that whole process.
And then can you just go in a little more detail, like, okay, why, for the average person, like they probably heard of the central nervous system, like, yeah, we want to take care of that, but why is that a big deal? Why can that make a big difference to someone's health, how they feel, even just their day-to-day energy?
Yeah, and again, I think it's a shame. I think this should be like almost day 1 of health class, like whenever we're learning about the human body, but it doesn't get talked about even at, the much more advanced levels when people are dealing with their health challenges. So central nervous system is essentially your brain and your spinal cord. But there's a connection there. So your brain sits in your skull, it all funnels down into, because it all has to come down into a ring that's about this big. So the atlas is the top bone in the neck. So you got this huge brain sitting in your skull, and it all funnels down right at the top of your neck into, maybe 1.5 inches across. And this transition zone between the brain and the spinal cord, it's called the brainstem. And it houses what's called 80% of what's called your autonomic nervous system. So again, we don't think about this a whole lot, but there's a part of our nervous system that we control. If I want to pick up a pencil, I can originate a neuron firing in my brain that travels down my spinal cord, eventually comes down to the nerves of my arm and initiates movement in the muscles that are responsible for picking up that pencil. So we have that voluntary side where we're making a choice and we're doing that by our own free will, so to speak. But then we kind of have this other side of it that we don't really give enough credit. It's called the autonomic nervous system. And the reason I say we don't give enough credit is because it keeps us alive 100%, and it takes care of things that we don't really think about, like keeping our body oriented and moving fluidly in gravity. So things like heart rate, digestion, sleep cycle, mood. I mean, that list goes on and on and on. But something as simple as if you're raising up your hand to wave goodbye to someone, you have billions of sensors all over your body that are continuously supplying information up to your brainstem about, hey, here's where my body's at in space. Your brainstem compresses that information in a fraction of a second and then puts an output to the stabilizer muscles, which are, again, autonomically controlled. So if you raise your right hand up, you automatically have muscles on the left side of your body contracting so you can stabilize, because if you didn't, you would change your center of gravity, you would just fall over on the ground. So again, these are it's amazing how many calculations and back and forth is going on every single second of every single day. And it's also amazing that we don't talk about it very much, because as human beings, we're obviously different than the entire animal kingdom, because we're upright, locomoting on 2 feet. And you just really don't see it that much in the animal kingdom. There's some exceptions, but nobody walks like we do. And the other really unique part about human beings is we're able to turn our heads really far compared to most animals. So it allows us to move from side to side. What that also means, though, is we have a higher propensity or more of an ability for the top of the neck to get misaligned in relationship to the skull than a lot of animals do. So the way our bones are designed, the way the movement of our head occurs, there is an opportunity for misalignment in human beings that, again, just doesn't simply exist for most of the animal kingdom. So we can end up in a more stressed state structurally, I believe, than most animals that exist on Earth. And with how complicated our neurology is and how much there is going on between the billions of nerves in the brainstem connecting to the brain, connecting to the spinal cord, it's like Grand Central Station. And I hardly hear anyone ever talking about it. And I was pissed when I started learning more about this, because I was like, how on earth is like not everyone talking about this or looking at this first if you're dealing with the health challenge? I mean, we're talking immune system, we're talking digestion, and right, like, and everybody's working on these things. It's like, yeah, I've got, irritable bowel syndrome, or I have like immune system that's going crazy. And the only way that people are being told that they can control it is by, hey, you need to take like this supplement, or you need to like eat this diet kind of thing. And I see a lot of people walk into my office and it's like, they have this huge head tilt. That atlas at the top of the neck has this big rotation on it. It's like a snake bite going on right on top of probably the most important thing in your body, which again, I consider to be the brainstem.
Yeah, it is amazing, isn't it? Where you go through, you've had a health challenge. Really, for most people, it's a struggle, like years and years unexplained. You've been in and out of doctors' offices, done a lot of research. And when you start to find your answers, because I went through this too, not the same thing as you. So I didn't learn about the structural alignment perspective or brainstem, but I did learn, for example, nutrition, or after nutrition, it was more about, detoxing, parasites and mold and toxic metals from the body. And once I started digging into it and getting results, like start feeling better, it is just shocking. You're like, why wasn't I learning about this from day one? Why don't more doctors or health practitioners talk about it? And it's just like, because you eventually do, you find a book or, a person or a resource where they just lay it out. They're like, oh, actually, this is what's going on. You're like, what? You mean I searched for, 3 years and all along it was right here? So it is pretty unbelievable what's mainstream, what we think is, health and what's mattered. And even, say the conventional medical system, or just where you get directed at the start when you have a health problem. And there's so many people out there that just go for years with these chronic health issues that aren't well addressed by conventional medicine or just the way we think about health and wellness. And so for a while there, you just think you're unique, you won't figure it out. There's just something unexplained, and that's sometimes that's what you get told in the room. But then to actually find the answer, it's just unbelievable. You're like, yeah, I could have learned this in second grade, and life would be a lot different. So I definitely understand what that's like. So for you though, it's interesting because you're talking about the structural component, and on the surface, it's like, okay, yeah, our necks and heads should be straight, and they're not, big deal. But when you were talking about the autonomic nervous system, that's the part that's not under our conscious control, right? It sounds like it's running in the background, and it kind of, based on whatever madness we do, maybe you use the example of waving your right arm, but maybe it could be stuffing my face with a large cheese pizza, or working 80 hours a week, or all kinds of crazy stuff we do in the modern world. It sounds like that's like the balancing side, and that keeps all these processes running. Like you said, mood and sleep, and I think about how many people want to improve their mood, how many people want to improve their sleep. So when you're putting it like that, it's like, oh, okay, these things are in large part controlled by, I don't know, the supercomputer basically the brain and the brain stem. And it's not controlled by us consciously. Like I can't control my mood and sleep cycle the same way I can control my left hand when I raise it. And so then when you put it like that, then I can start to see like, okay, I'm out of alignment. If I got a crooked head and it's putting pressure on that supercomputer that controls all these important things, then yeah, that could cause some problems. And it seems like, especially, you go over 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, like then I can really see how it can add up. But again, it's another example of something. It makes sense now that we're talking about it, but I've never really thought about it that way. And I certainly don't think, most people are aware of this or taught about it, or certainly like in your case, like people aren't really directed that way. They kind of have to stumble into, a chiropractor's office because they've been to 10 doctors or, 10 experts and haven't gotten any relief.
Yeah.
The structural was a second leg. Then that's what inspired you to go to chiropractic school, and did that kind of turn your health situation around, or did you need to find some other areas too?
Yeah, exactly. So the rabbit hole definitely kept going deeper. And so one of the things I had no idea off the bat is like there's all these different types of chiropractic. So I just got chiropractic, and like most people, I assumed that's what chiropractic is because that's like what I got. Come to find, after going to chiropractic school, and I met my wife at chiropractic school, and she had been exposed to a bunch of different types of chiropractic techniques. So yeah, there's over like 200 different types of chiropractic techniques, and I eventually fell in love with one that falls under the sphere of upper cervical work. It's called NUCCA, NUCCA. So I loved it because it does focus really specifically on that head and neck interface. So I felt so much better. Kind of outside stuff started making more sense. Like my posture had always been horrible. But again, that's one of those autonomic things that we're told is, hey, you just need to remember to sit up straight. But come to learn that wasn't the case. So I felt like my body was in a better position. I felt like I had more energy. I felt like my brain fog started to clear up. So I was noticing a lot of really cool things with that. And
just from adjustments?
Yeah. So yeah, getting the structure back on track and reducing that upper cervical misalignment and taking that snake bite effect off the brainstem, I feel like opened up a hole in the world for me and allowed me to process and interface with the world in a way that I hadn't been able to before, which was super cool. So I still am on fire about it, graduated school, went out to practice, and like a lot of people fresh out of school, I was working a ton of hours. I was working on getting a new business off the ground. Eventually, had a young family, was, little kids at home. So I was getting to the point where I was burning on both ends. I was feeling really burnt out, and I was feeling really frustrated because I had leaned so heavily on, hey, if I put the right things in my body and if I take care of that structural side of things and make sure I'm in a good spot, then my body's going to know what to do and I'm going to be good to go. The further I got along and the longer I was in this really busy state, I felt my health declining more and more and more. So my energy was down. I was really frustrated because I'd be tired all day, but then I'd have trouble sleeping at night. I would always wake up super tired. My brain fog started coming back in really badly. I gained a bunch of, I gained probably, like 35 pounds in like a year and a half kind of thing. And so I was just feeling like it's off the rails again. So I doubled down on everything that I knew. I was taking like thousands of dollars worth of supplements. And I was like, man, if I just find this right combination, I'm gonna be good to go. And it just wasn't working. Like I felt like I kept slipping more and more. I kept feeling more and more tired. Like it was I was to the point I was like literally falling asleep at my desk. I would get home and I wouldn't have any energy to play with my kids. It would just be like, I'd want to get home, just watch TV and be like, man, I just need a break here kind of thing. So eventually, and again, I met my wife at chiropractic school. She's also a chiropractor. So she's amazing at finding all those different things. And I'm definitely going to give her credit for finding this third basket because I'd never even heard of it. And if she hadn't told this to me, I probably would have just kind of brushed it to the side, even if I had heard of it. So that this third category that I wasn't even aware of is called biophysics. So some people call it like quantum biology. It goes by a few different names. So essentially the idea here though is our bodies are very much designed to interact with the world around us. And a lot of times it's not stuff that we see to the naked eye. So electromagnetic frequencies, electrons, and we're kind of getting into this quantum world of, things that we've learned so much more about even in the past 5 years. And I'm just talking about like the scientific community as a whole. Like we're realizing that there's so much more down in the minutia that we had never seen before. And the more we're learning about these different aspects of the world that we live in that we don't necessarily, again, see with the naked eye, the more people are asking the questions like, hey, what does this actually mean for the human body? Or what does this mean for people's health? And the answers are astounding in a lot of cases. And it's far more of an interaction than anybody ever realized. And so once I started learning more about this, it opened up this whole new world for me. It was like if you never knew that nutrition could like help you feel better, and then all of a sudden you're like, "Hey, nutrition can help you feel better." You're like, holy crap! It just all these. It's like, whoa, I could do this. I could, So there's so many action steps available to me, and in many cases, I've found it like much easier than the biochemistry space. Like a lot of times, food stuff can be challenging, or finding the right food, or making the right food, or eating the right timing. There's a lot to it. So there's a lot in this biophysics realm as well. But again, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit there with easy action steps to take. And I know you mentioned the blue light blocking glasses earlier, but that's a perfect example of something that I have found very easy to put in that has made a big difference for me.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So I was going to ask you, like, what's an example? Because for the average person, we hear quantum physics and, the light waves and interconnected nature of life. So what does it boil down to mattering for a person's day to day?
Yeah. And the word sounds scary, right? Like biophysics, like that still sounds scary to me. I did not
like a combination, biology and physics, two scary things in one.
or like electrons. It's like, I'm not like a Nobel Prize researcher or whatever. Like, so, here's one of my favorite examples, just like sunlight. Like obviously when the sun starts rising in the mornings, our bodies have more of a tendency to want to be awake. And after the sun sets at night, we find ourselves getting more tired. Like that's just part of the way we're wired as human beings, right?
But you're saying it's because there's like sensors or some type of connection with our environment more than just like even a first grader's like, sun comes up, you wake up, sun goes down, you go to sleep. But I think what's really interesting about what you're saying is correct me if I'm wrong, or explain it a little more eloquently. But it's like our bodies sense that somehow, and that then messages to a lot of other things that are going in the body. And so it's not just as simple as wake up before noon is a good idea, and go to bed before 4 a.m. is a good idea.
Right. Yeah. So, it's like one of those things where it's like, it almost sounds so stupid. It's like, who cares kind of thing. You're like, yeah, okay, sun comes up, we wake up, sun goes down, we go down. So the part again is cool is like science is progressing so rapidly and we're learning so much more that it's like, okay, well, like what is sunlight, right? And what they found is sunlight has a visible component, and then it's also got infrared component. And it's also got a UV component. So there's frequencies that we can see and there's frequencies that we can't see. And even frequencies like kind of bothered me for a bit. It's like, what are you talking about? Like it just feels like so ethereal or whatever. But I mean, a lot of things in life are like that. Like you turn on your light, you don't really think about it, but that is a light wave that travels as a frequency and then it enters our eyeball. Our eyeball has special cells that are designed to get those photons and frequencies and then change it biochemically into a signal to the brain that then processes an image. Like even the simplest things that happen in our day-to-day lives are like just an absolute miracle of things working together. But yeah, our body is do have sensors, and these sensors are directly connected to brain function, hormone function, and essentially marching orders for the body's like, okay, what do I do? What am I doing right now? What's appropriate? What's going on around me? What do I need to be doing? And so in sunlight, let's just take visible light because that's the one that's easiest for people to grasp because we see it, right? The sun comes up, there's light, and we can see things. So we have a ton of photoreceptors in our eye, again, that are designed to pick up those different frequencies. And so when the photoreceptors in our eye, for example, see more red and orange hues, it starts to stimulate different things to turn the body and switch the body on for the day. So when the sun comes up, you're thinking oranges and reds, and you're seeing all those beautiful colors. So your eyes see that, and it tells the body, hey, your day is getting started. You need to start setting all these different things in motion. So one of it being melatonin. So your body is on this melatonin cycle. So seeing red or orange light first thing in the morning from the sun already gives your body instructions of, hey, you need to start processing melatonin in this sequence of events. So that way, when night's coming around, we have enough melatonin in the right spots to go to sleep so you can heal well and feel well and have this cycle. So a lot of people have heard circadian rhythm. And we always equate that with sleep, like, oh, my circadian rhythm is my sleep, or I have my smartwatch that tells me what my circadian is doing kind of thing. But circadian rhythm is actually this balance or this rhythm that we have as human beings where we activate, energize, and do all these things during the day. But then we need to wind down and we need to rest at night because that's when 99% of our healing happens. And for a lot of people, there's this whole thing where day mode and night mode are all out of balance, but we take some of these things for granted. Like, again, we just turn on the lights in our house. So it's like, yeah, I get light whenever I want to. It's no big deal. I mean, 200 years ago, that wasn't an option, right? Like when the sun came up, that was your light. When the sun went down, there was no more light. And our bodies are wired to that. So we tend to think or look around us in our day-to-day world of like, this is the world. That's not really how our bodies were built. So things like artificial light or the bright light that's coming from our phones and computers and TV after the sun has gone down is really confusing to our brains and our bodies in terms of what am I supposed to be doing? Because our bodies and brains are supposed to be getting that information. Our sensors are designed to take in information about these different things going on and then kick off this cascade of events of hormone production, brain function, neurochemical function. So understanding that, like, hey, this is a game that my body is playing right now was really, really important for me because not that you have to like go live in a mountain away from everything and become a hermit kind of thing, but understanding again the factors that are in play made it way less frustrating for me because I could finally start. It's like if you have chocolate cake every once in a while, that's fine, but you're understanding that you're playing a game of like, hey, I'm doing this because it tastes good and it's probably not going to be the best thing for me, but there's a few things I can do after it. Like same kind of thing. It's not like you have to throw away your phone, but time of day matters. There's things that you can do to your screen that matter. There's blue light blocking glasses. So there's different ways that you can play the games for these different factors that live in this biophysics space.
So what do you think? Because it can get complicated really quickly, right? Like, okay, the glasses, the light, the phone timing, the natural sunlight. So have you found something to be the biggest bang for your buck, like the most important, or does it depend on the person?
So I think the focusing on light is a really good place and maybe an easier place to start from the standpoint of natural sunlight's going to set a good rhythm for you because we're built around that. If you're getting artificial light before the sun comes up or after the sun goes down, that's going to have a tendency to throw off your rhythm. So from that perspective, the blue light blocking glasses, either before the sun comes up or after the sun sets, I think is probably the best place to start because so many of us have gotten into this habit. Again, I was right there. Is like end of the long day, kids have finally gone to bed, or you're just looking to relax a little bit. Your TV's on, your phone's in your hand, and you got all these LED artificial lights around you in your house. And so you're just being bombarded with all this artificial light. It's really high on the blue end of the spectrum. So it's very activating. So basically tricks your body into thinking you're in the middle of the day. So your brain is like, wait, I thought I'm trying to go down and like make all this melatonin and get ready for sleep. And all these receptors in your eye, and we also have a bunch of photoreceptors in our skin, are sending information of like, hey, I'm getting a bunch of blue light actually. That means it's the middle of the day. So we need to start kicking out cortisol. We need to get ready for activation mode. And this is where a lot of people just end up in a really challenging place in terms of, I feel like my energy sucks. I feel like my sleep sucks. And then there's usually a cascade of events that happen with that, whether that's like, hey, I have terrible brain fog, or I'm having a hard time losing weight, or I mean, that list goes on and on. So I think getting in a better light rhythm is super important because, again, we kind of take sleep for granted of like, yeah, you kind of need to sleep at night or whatever. Otherwise, you might feel tired. But again, like sleeping enough hours is important. Quality of sleep is important. And the reason for that is because we do all of our healing at night. And so if you're not getting effective sleep, you're in a losing game in terms of your health. Something's going to give at some point if your body can't recharge and restore itself at night. And so I think getting your light rhythm and your light balance down first, or putting that effort in first, is the best place to start. Because there is a ton of like great blue light blocking glasses out there. So there's ones that look almost clear or amberish. So those are going to clean up a little bit. There's orange ones that are going to be kind of like moderate. And then there's red ones that just straight up do not let blue light into your eyes. Like if you put those on and you look at your microwave with the blue light there, you will not see the numbers on the microwave because like literally the blue light can't come through. So again, like just for me, it was like, okay, I used to just scroll on my phone and like, look at social media for an hour and my brain would kind of turn off or whatever. And like once I learned about this stuff, it's like, okay, that's an absolute disaster in terms of my body trying to wind down before bed. So I'm not going to make that my habit. And if I need to like look at my phone, like, and I know we need to like answer a text or answer an email sometimes, and that happens. But if it's after sunset, I'm putting on my those red blue light blocking glasses, and saying like, I want to be on my phone as little as possible, especially in that time between when the sun's going down and bedtime. So I've really honored that time a lot more of like, hey, this is actually a really important time for my body getting ready for a good night's sleep so I can heal well and actually regenerate and like feel good the next day. So it quickly pivoted from me being like, oh, I just need to do like all this electronic stuff because I'm so tired, to like, hey, I'm actually in a good rhythm where I feel like it's a good nighttime routine for me now, where I can like read a book for 15 or 30 minutes and I actually feel tired after the sun goes down. And I'm just going to bed and I can fall asleep pretty quickly and I actually wake up feeling good. And it's like, it's just a good start to the day. It's not this like, oh crap, my day's starting again. I'm having to pull myself out of bed. And it's like this huge effort just to get the day going kind of thing.
Okay. So you actually liked it, like you made the change and then it felt better. Because I think a lot of people hear stuff like this and then, they resist it. I mean, I certainly did. Like I totally get what you're talking about when you're, building your practice, you're working 60, 70, 80 hours a week. Like I did that for a number of years in my life, and totally be on the phone the last hour, maybe 2 hours of the night, for sure. Phone, computer. And yeah, maybe I had an idea, okay, this isn't the greatest for my health, but I was, still young in my 20s. I felt good. I'd wake up. Well, here's the thing. I thought I felt good. I still had energy, but I think a lot of people are running around at 80% of their best, 70%, 60%, and it happens gradually. So you get used to it. So I was kind of like that. I was at 80%, but I still thought I felt good. And so to actually stop, like put my foot, it felt like torture, like I'm in timeout or something. It just wasn't something I was going to do. Like, oh, I got to turn my phone off the hour before. But it sounds like for you, the way you just described it anyway, was that felt good. Like, was it hard to make the shift at all? Or you just immediately, you're like, wow, I feel so much better each day. This is worth it.
Well, I guess kind of both. So I think the coolest part about this biophysical like category is I feel like out of all the stuff that I've done, I think this stuff responds the quickest.
The light blocking glasses.
Just in general, like any effort that I put into the biophysical realm, I feel like I see noticeable changes in like a week or two.
Wow.
I feel like if you change, if you've been eating like crap for a long time, like if you switch your diet, you may be, you might be a few months out before you're really like feeling better kind of thing. Cause like there's this whole transition, you're getting used to it and all that kind of stuff. So, for me and the other people in my family with like just other stuff that we've noticed, we feel like the effort that we put in the biophysical realm responds the quickest in terms of like immediate return on investment for the effort that you're putting in.
Yeah.
And so I think what you brought up before is really important of like, man, it's just like there's a billion things you can do. It feels super overwhelming kind of thing. So to me, it's just understanding the game that you're playing, because again, just like I didn't even know that looking at like blue light after the sun went down like would affect anything. Like I really did feel like, hey, this is a great way for me to relax. Like, I kind of get to turn my brain off and just good to go kind of thing. So now that I understand that's the game I'm playing, it's like you can take it as far as you want to. You could take that as like, hey, I'm just going to turn off my phone. I'm just not going to look at my phone like 5 minutes before bed and like just try to give myself a little break. Or it could be like, hey, after the sun goes down, I'm going to put on my orange blue light blockers. Or like, hey, I don't care what I look like, so I'm going to put on these like matrix looking red blue light blocking glasses to like get that full effect kind of thing. So there's like, you can take it as far or as little as you want to. But again, to me, it's more of understanding of like, hey, this is a game to be played and I can play that however I want to. But again, understanding that if I'm looking at a bunch of artificial blue light after the sun goes down, that's going to affect my neurochemistry and my biochemistry, my melatonin production, and my body's ability to go to sleep. Like to me, that's by far the most important thing, and that everyone can make that decision for themselves. And obviously, yeah, like everyone lives different lives. Like some people have to answer emails at those time kind of things. So maybe it's more important for them to have those red blue light blocking glasses. They're doing that on a consistent basis. For me, again, though, is just like I was just in these habits. And once I changed those habits, like I didn't feel like my life was being like greatly improved by scrolling through social media for an hour kind of thing. So it's just kind of funny. I always used to love reading. I had completely gotten away from it. So for me, it's, within the biophysics realm, it's a better choice, but also it's just a better way for me to unwind at the end of the day kind of thing. And I was able to step into something that I had enjoyed previously. So for me, that was a good change.
Hey there. I hope you're enjoying this conversation. But you know what? I want to bring you even better content in the future. One way you can make sure that happens is by hitting the follow button on your phone in Apple Podcast, Spotify, or whatever app you prefer. Now, if we're being honest with each other, you and I both know there's no way you're going to do this later. So let's take 7 seconds right now, and I'll walk you through the process. Pull out your phone, unlock it, and open Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or the listening app of your choice. Now search for Wiser Than Before Podcast and hit follow. In Apple, that's the plus sign in the top right corner. And in Spotify, it's the button with the word follow just below the logo. That's it. You're all done. Doesn't it feel good to cross an item off your to-do list? Thank you for doing that. By hitting that follow button, you are actively bringing better guests and content to this podcast. Now, let's get back to the show. And I also think it's really cool that you saw results in a week or two, because a lot of this health stuff, like we talk about it, and it makes sense, but it makes sense in theory. And we don't know, like if someone knew for a fact, I'm going to sleep better, I'm going to have a better mood, or I'm going to wake up with more energy if I do 2 weeks of, not looking into blue light like 2 hours before bed, then I think a lot more people would do it. But there's just so much, and again, it gets overwhelming, or people are like, well, is that really true? Is that really even possible? Because like I said, it makes sense when we talk about it, but it's so different from what we're taught, from how we're raised, and the Western society's concept of health and just our lifestyle, that it's just easy to discount. It's so weird. Even me, like some of these things I'll hear, and it's just because it's so different from the norm. I have a tough time, putting it in my brain and be like, I'm actually going to try that, which obviously makes no sense logically, because the norm in our society is terrible health. I mean, the norm is overweight to the point where it's like drastically affecting health. It's got negative long-term health outcomes. The norm is, probably being on multiple medications. So, the norm is not normal. It's not meant how, human beings are meant to be, or, what picture of good health looks like. So it's kind of weird. We get raised in this this bubble or commonality, and like you said, it drives your habits and your thinking. But for you to do something like and get such a good change in a week or two, that's really motivating. I think most people, that's a pretty short enough period of time, like people could try it out and notice some difference, then they might be motivated to take it further. Do you think on average a person could see something in 2 weeks? Or let me ask you this way, on average, if a person wanted to see some noticeable benefit, maybe just like a little bump where they could be like, okay, yeah, this is not nothing. I definitely do feel different. I definitely do feel better. How far do you think they need to take it to see some type of benefit like that?
I really hesitate to be like, yeah, if you do this, you're going to get this kind of thing. Because obviously there's so many different layers to anybody's health and in different proportions and all that. Just speaking from that firsthand experience, for me, it really was within 2 weeks. And then again with like once me and my wife like started working on this stuff, obviously we noticed the good changes, and we we want to get our kids on this as quickly as possible kind of thing. So, yeah, for us, it literally was a couple weeks, and I've heard that for other people. I've heard as little as a week. So I think 2 weeks is a great testing period. And especially if you're like, hey, I'm going to kind of take this seriously or whatever for 2 weeks, I'm not going to look at any screens for the hour before I go to bed kind of thing. And especially if there's like a big thing hanging out in front of you, if you're like, man, I just know my sleep is a disaster, or hey, I always wake up tired. I think if you got something like that, it's really easy. It makes it easier to be like, hey, I have this metric that I'm keeping an eye on. And then you have a little bit more tangible outcome in terms of like, hey, here's the result I'm going for. So it's always that conversation of, like, what do you use it as your measuring stick for success? And for most people, that's going to be a symptom, because those are going to be the things that are, bothering you the most and something that you don't want there kind of thing. So I think especially if you're noticing those types of issues, either like energy is all over the place during the day, or you're waking up feeling tired, or you're having a hard time staying asleep or going to sleep, to me, it's almost a no-brainer to at least try and see how it goes for you. Because a lot of it is just as simple as like putting down your phone or making a couple changes at certain times of the day.
Right. Yeah, it's free. You pretty much have all the tools there already, maybe with the exception of the glasses if you want to try those. And yeah, I mean, I liked what you said earlier. Like we mainly think of the biochemical realm. So it's like, what pill do I need to take? What medicine do I need to take? So you talked about melatonin earlier. I know a lot of people will take melatonin because their sleep's terrible. They have trouble falling asleep. But when you think about it in the way you've explained this, it's gonna fall apart at some point, because it's like there's a mess going on in the body. I'm taking the pill of melatonin to try and override it, and either I have to take more and more, or eventually it stops working. Which a lot of people, a lot of people complain of both of those things. And then when you describe it this way, it's like, well, your body starts producing the melatonin based on signals it gets from the environment, say these shades of light, orange and red. Then if you give it a good dose of that at the right times of day, it can produce everything you need. And then so that is simpler. You don't need a pill. You don't need to try and override all these things going on in the body. But you got to break that love connection with the phone, which isn't always easy. But I agree with you. Like, it's like the more pain someone's in, the worse their symptoms are, then the more motivation they have to do these things. Unfortunately, I mean, it would be great if we were in our best health and then would do these things to keep good health, but that's just not how it goes. And it wasn't for me either. And I think you can go so far on the other end of the spectrum too. Like when I was at my sickest and like really had a health collapse and just ongoing chronic health issues, I tried everything under the sun. I was really committed to it because couldn't function, couldn't really work, or it certainly couldn't be social or be active. And I would do these things and sometimes not feel that much, but it was just because I was so, I had so much to clean up in my health. But one thing that I definitely did notice just through talking to you, I got some of these, I call them red lights, but I put on these red lights at night. They have And it was so much more calming. And then I would flip on like an overhead light. I'd need something in the kitchen. And it would just be like bright, it'd be like if you're sleeping a nice, peaceful sleep, and then someone rips open the shades and just hits you. And you're like, oh my God. So I really, when I was that sick, I was more sensitive, and I really could see the difference, like how much more calm and peaceful it was with the red lights at night versus the fluorescent overhead lights at night. I'm like, oh my God, like imagine me doing that day after day, year after year. But it wasn't until I, was really struggling that I could, had the sensitivity and could really perceive the difference.
Yeah, no, I had a very similar experience. Like the more you get used to not looking at that stuff, it's like, it's amazing the difference.
Yeah. Wow. That's wild. Okay, cool. So I think that's a good thing for, someone listening, if they want to give it a try. Sounds like shoot for 2 weeks. Try not to look at the phone within 2 hours of bed. Probably TV would be ideal too. And then if they really want to go for it, maybe check out the glasses and see how it goes. So we've already covered a lot of ground, but can't leave everyone hanging. Anyone listening hanging. We've covered 3. You used the 4-legged stool analogy. I think we covered 3 of them. You said biochemical, biophysics, and then structure. Those were the first 3 you've covered, right?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. And could we move into the 4th?
Sure. This is the one I'm least familiar with, and I feel like in a lot of ways just kind of get started on. But I do think the mental emotional component is also a hugely underrated, and I think in a lot of ways we're kind of on the new frontier of this in terms of people even being open to recognizing that these things do have an effect on not only our state of mental health, but also our physical health as well. And again, I think there's a lot better conversations happening between people of, it used to be mental emotional health is over here and physical health is over here. But I mean, it's all within the same body. It all affects, even at a very basic level, it's going to affect the nervous system, and, the nervous system talks to everything. So I think this is another realm that, I have no doubt in a couple of years, I'll be like, oh gosh, I can't believe, I was dealing with all this stuff before and I didn't have these tools kind of thing. But yeah, I think a lot of us are walking around with more mental stress or emotional stress than we've probably even realized. And I don't think for a lot of us, we've been given healthy ways to, 1, even recognize that, but 2, good ways to deal with it. So I feel like for me, right now I'm doing a better job of recognizing like, hey, yeah, there's probably like these things going on. And I feel like the bigger challenge is a lot of times we try to just like think our way through this, right? Like, hey, I'm feeling a certain way. I'm going to try to think my way past this or use my brain to like make myself feel differently kind of thing. And I think anyone who's, come to that point where they're looking at things and they're like, I wish my brain like kind of thought about things differently, or I wish I could feel a different way on a more consistent basis. And then they try to like force that action. I think everyone comes to that realization of like, oh crap. Like, I think, a lot of those are more subconscious processes that we get to kind of like consciously look at. But then it's like, how do you bust through that looking glass and make a change on the other side? So, yeah, I've in no ways consider myself the expert on this, but I do think that it's going to play a much more significant role in the healthcare space in the next 10 to 15 years than it ever has. And I don't really feel like it's entered fully yet, but I do feel like there is better conversations happening of people recognizing that they have those things going on, or that they're feeling a certain way that they don't want to, or that they have mental, emotional patterns that they would like to move past. So my perspective is I think that has a lot bigger impact on our physical health than a lot of people are still talking about right now. And I think finding those tools to break through that glass, so to speak, of that barrier between I'm consciously noticing here's how I'm feeling or what's going on, and being able to tap into that unconscious programming that we've got through various experiences, or just as our brains and our bodies were growing through childhood, and being able to put directed action into making a change in that realm.
Cool. Yeah. I love it because it gives, just one other area that people can look at, for their health, for their happiness, to improve their life, because it's pretty obvious that it's not just biochemistry. It's not just pills, and it's not just what we, even beyond pills, just like our current healthcare system, or just our, like I've said before, our Western society's understanding of health. If it was, there wouldn't be as many sick people struggling as there are now. And the baseline of society, the baseline is for people to be tired, dragging, stress. Like, it's so common. If you would ask someone, how you doing? Like, great. I've hardly any stress. Like, that would be a very odd thing for someone to say, and you probably wouldn't believe them. So that just shows like how far it's gone, and the way we live in. So obviously, what our first thought or the first recommendations people get for improving their health or dealing with, say the symptoms that start to pop up, the low energy, the crappy mood, brain fog, whatever it may be, digestive problems. Obviously, it's not just as simple as ingesting some pills or doing standard of care. So this is just one more avenue people can look into. And I think it's great, because there's so many people out there. And I went through this 2 major times in my life. Not the same as what you described, but conceptually the same, where it's like major health issues, doing everything I can. It's just not working. And it took a lot of digging and investigating. So it's a great message that you have. I think it's great that people can hear about this stuff, hopefully in advance of where we got to where life is completely put on halt in some ways till you get your health back. And it's great for people to be aware of these things. But with that said, let's flip back to the biophysics area, because I love what you said about how basically you said this area, people, you found it to be the most bang for the buck. Like, it's actually a little easier, and like diet and nutrition, that was the first one that changed my life. And it was my kind of like wake up moment. I changed how I ate. And within 2 months, all my allergies went away, all my chronic symptoms. I started sleeping better, having more energy. And so that was just like, I was just like, what? Like, why didn't I know about this? Why did it take 30 years of life to figure this out? And so for a long time, I just thought nutrition was the answer to everything. But the truth is, it's not. It definitely can't solve everything. And I found that out, a decade later with my second kind of health crisis. So, and just nutrition like that can take a lot of work, at least at the beginning, a lot of learning, a lot of changing of habits. So anything that can help people get a boost in their health that's efficient, good bang for their buck, maybe a little bit, less barrier to entry, a little easier to like implement, I'm all for. So what's another one or some other ones of your favorites that you like?
Yeah. So again, the light was the one that kind of hit me smack in the face up front. And so I think that's a great place to start. Electromagnetic frequencies was kind of a second tier. Like, the more I started understanding the light stuff and how our body picks that up and then equates that into different processes. So, just what we were talking about before, like literally the type of light that your eyes are seeing at different types of day can literally control your cortisol levels. For example, going over to stress, like most people are completely maxed out on cortisol and burnt out kind of thing. So, electromagnetic frequencies was one that kind of freaked me out. Again, I was just like, man, I don't really know what that means. Like, it's like this invisible wavelength. Like really, what are you talking about? So, the more you start learning about it is like there's electromagnetic frequencies everywhere. And so our body is in tune to this as well. Like, the Earth as a planet kind of has a resting state of electromagnetic frequencies that come around it.
So what does that mean? It emits like a pulse, a frequency that's like a set level?
Yeah. So just Earth as a physical structure has, like 11 different layers, a solid iron core, different proportions of like temperatures and minerals moving past each other in these fluid layers. So there's like a lot going on underneath the crust of the surface that like we don't see a whole lot. And so anytime you get movement between different materials at different temperatures and everything like that. There starts to be electric potentials that form. There's anytime you have electricity moving, you have magnetism that comes along with that. So again, just the world and the physical structures around us, the interaction between all those different things, it ends up like Earth has a magnetic field, right? Us as human beings, our bodies and our nervous systems operate over bioelectric circuits. Like we're literally sending electric signals over our nerves that's being received on another side, and that's how our body's transmitting information. Like again, we don't really talk about it like that, but we're highly reliant on electromagnetic signals and electromagnetic frequencies to live. Like that's like if your body can't send if your brain can't send an electromagnetic signal down the spinal cord, like you're dead. Like that's literally when you're at the hospital, they're trying to see, is this person alive? They're looking at your electromagnetic frequencies in your brain and how your brain's communicating with itself. So, not to give like a full physics lesson, but again, like electricity, magnetism are all really interconnected with how our bodies work as human beings. And so, and again, just like again with the Earth has its own magnetic field, it has its own electromagnetic currencies and pulses. So we're built to have this back and forth interaction. And what they're finding again is that our bodies have way more of an ability to pick up electromagnetic frequencies than we ever knew. And it makes sense that this is new because this isn't like light, like you just turn on, it's a lot less tangible because it is like these invisible frequencies that we can't see with our naked eye. So what caught me off guard with this conversation is, again, become much more of a problem, even in like the past 15, 20 years with how much we're bombarded with artificial electromagnetic frequencies. So your Wi-Fi in your house, your cell phone, the cell phone towers, like the 5G, like everything that's coming out, they're estimating like 10,000 times more powerful electromagnetic frequencies flying through the air than they ever used to be. And that's exactly what like your Wi-Fi box does. It takes a little bit of electricity and transforms it into this big electromagnetic signal so that all your devices can reach it and you can get it at every single corner of your house. Or the cell phone tower that's 3 miles away can throw off an electromagnetic signal that's so powerful that it blows through those 3 miles and it goes through the brick wall of your house and it gets to your phone as you're sitting right there. Like we don't really think about it, but it's amazing what's actually happening. Like it's a very cool idea. And it's like, if you just kind of look at what humanity has done, it really does feel like science fiction sometimes. Like if you look at the science behind what's happening. So like it or not, there is invisible frequencies and wavelengths flying back and forth. And it's the only reason that your phone works without a cord being plugged into it. And I never thought about it. That's just like cool Wi-Fi. Cool. Like it's a signal. It's a physical signal that's coming either from your box or cell phone tower or whatever. And these are high frequency, really powerful signals that you're not finding. Like if we turned off all those electronics, like these are not frequencies that we see naturally on planet Earth. And again, they're like tens of thousands of times higher. And, so every time I see a commercial, like we got more towers coming out that's going to be 10G. And it's like, that's a stronger signal and it allows for the transfer of more information more quickly. So it makes total sense from a technological perspective, but nobody up until this point, like I'd say just in the past couple of years, people are finally asking the question like, hey, what does that actually mean for us as human beings and our health and our bodies? And the answer is it's pretty stressful, actually. So even as something as simple as like your Wi-Fi coming from your box in your house, that intensity of signal confuses what's called a calcium gate channel in your cells. And pretty much every cell in your body has these calcium gate channels. So if I picture our cell as a circle, we got these little mini gates that look certain things in and out, and it's called the semi-permeable membrane. So it's like there's kind of like a bouncer for different types of things that your cell can either let in or out. So when EMF signal from like a Wi-Fi box comes and blasts towards your body, your cells start throwing open these calcium gates. So all of a sudden we have this huge imbalance of calcium in the cell versus out of the cell. And then your body's smart. It's trying to do whatever it can to always be in balance and get back to that nice balanced state as quick as it can. So what it does is it starts throwing out other minerals to try to counterbalance. So a ton of people are like magnesium depleted. And again, everyone's like, oh, you need to take more magnesium. You need to take more magnesium. You're magnesium depleted. And for a lot of people, that is very true. And, some of the things that people say, like in terms of like the soil quality not being as good, like I really believe that's true as well. So I'm not saying it's not important to like supplement certain minerals and everything, but I also think that there's a flip side of that equation. I think a ton of people are bleeding out minerals out of their cells on a consistent basis because we're just in this bath of high frequency electromagnetic frequencies. And the body is like literally just hanging out for dear life, trying to do the best that it can to counterbalance this environment that it wasn't built for. Like, again, if you look over the whole span of humanity, like we're in just such a amazing technical advancement just over even like the past 15, 20 years. Like the human body is having to deal with things that it has never had to in the history of humanity. And so again, we just kind of think of like, oh, this is life, but we've introduced a lot of things that the human body was never really built for. And so I think a lot of people are finding themselves in a state where it's like, yeah, my body's not healing. Like I feel like crap all the time. I can't really think of things that I enjoy doing because like I don't feel good kind of thing. And I think the biggest thing that we need to check moving forward is just what you described. I think the scary part is this becoming so normal. That's just like, yeah, that's kind of like the direction that we're moving it as humanity. So I love that. Like even you just like putting this podcast together and like getting the information out. Like I think it's really important that we keep having discussions as human beings and recognizing that if you feel like crap, like I know pretty much everyone else feels like crap, but that's not a normal state for humanity. Like there's a big difference between common and normal. And I do think that biophysics is one of the huge keys for that. So for artificial electromagnetic frequencies, that was probably the next big thing that kind of knocked my socks off. So we just started doing easy things like literally unplugging the Wi-Fi box at night. Because again, you're doing most of your resetting and healing at nighttime. So I think that focusing on nighttime is going to be, again, your biggest bang for your buck. And doesn't have to be super complicated. So yeah, we just started unplugging our Wi-Fi box at night. I noticed a difference after like a week of that about how I was feeling when I was waking up in the morning. It can be as easy as either having your phone on airplane mode or just not keeping it in the bedroom next to you. Like at least 5 feet away is the rule if you can just not have it in the bedroom. Like most people were just getting that EMF blast all night. The Wi-Fi is still going. The cell phone signal is still getting to your phone that's sitting right next to your head as you're sleeping in bed kind of thing. And yeah, it's like no wonder we all wake up feeling like we need 10 cups of coffee to start the day. It's like our calcium voltage gated channels have been bleeding all night. Like it tends to elevate cortisol when you're getting that really high frequency blast of electromagnetic frequencies. So same thing, like just how many of us are cortisol burnout or that adrenal fatigue. And then there's a laundry list that comes after that. Again, like the brain fog, the weight gain, there's so many things that come up with that. And then you feel like you're just fighting uphill with everything that you're trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That was a great explanation. Because one of the problems with EMF is that there's so many basically like conspiracy theorists who are speaking that message. And so it makes everyone else a bit tone deaf to it, or people who aren't sure, who are like, maybe that could be an issue, but I'm not sure. When you have someone saying such an extreme, I find that it shuts off. Everyone else just shuts off to the message. And that was the case for many years. It was like either you believed EMFs were evil and, a lot of the tech and the society was evil and it was just out to get us, or, you were like, well, that's kind of ridiculous. So people shut it out. But the way you described it is like, because I've also heard people who, say that's nonsense. EMFs can't hurt us because the earth has EMFs, right? But the way you described it makes a lot of sense where you're like, yeah, there are EMFs that are natural to the earth and that human bodies are used to experiencing, feeling, being connected to. And then there's 10, 100 times more powerful ones that have been created by human beings in the recent past, and those have a lot bigger effect. It's actually the exact same thing about light. It's like, yeah, there's sunlight and natural tones, and then there's bright ass artificial fluorescent lights that, as we talked about in depth, can really affect the body. So the way you described it, it's kind of like EMFs do a similar thing in their own way. And when you're talking about the calcium channels, so you're saying that the cells will leach out calcium, or you said just all kinds of mineral imbalances will start to follow?
Yes. I mean, like usually the cells run a tight game, right? Like things are only opening and closing when there's a very precise order of events. So there's things called voltage gated channels. So if the cell membrane reaches a certain voltage, certain doors will swing open. And this isn't just calcium. This is like there's happens a bunch within the cell, because the cell needs to be able to bring things in, it needs to be able to push things out, but it also needs to be able to be a cell. So it has to have that control of what's coming in, what's going out. So again, voltage gated channels are one way that the body does that. There's also chemical gated channels where if some sort of molecule, it's almost like a lock and key, like if the molecule hits at a certain point in the cell, then the door will swing open kind of thing. But again, when you're talking about electromagnetic frequency, you're talking about potential for electric interaction with that. So especially for those voltage gated channels, which is the case for calcium, if you have a really intense blast of electromagnetic frequencies coming at it, and the calcium channel is really in tune to, hey, what's the voltage in the surrounding environment? Should I be open and closed? Then those are going to be even more susceptible to just swinging open when the body didn't necessarily dictate that should be the case in response to an external artificial signal.
Okay, right. Yeah. So just these electrically controlled processes just get these strong blasts of EMFs, and that can make things go a little haywire.
Yeah, like norepinephrine, right? Like an adrenaline shot. Like your body has adrenaline receptors. So if you put adrenaline into your bloodstream, your body's going to act in a certain way. Same thing for these voltage gated channels. So like the adrenaline shot would be an example of more of that lock and key model, but there's other things in your body that are tuned more to the voltage or the electrical side of things. And again, those are going to be more susceptible to these huge artificial electromagnetic blasts.
Okay. Yeah. Gotcha. That's a more clear way of explaining it. When I got really sick my second time after, my 20th doctor and specialist, I just really was like, okay, I'm going to dig in and learn all that I can and start to take the responsibility to not like figure it out, like I'm going to discover something that every Nobel laureate to date hasn't figured out, but I'm like, I want to piece this together, and what I'm being told right now just it doesn't make sense, and it's not good enough. So I started doing that, and on the 21st doctor, because I already had appointments booked months in advance, I went to it. And for the first time, something popped up on a lab test. Like all the other times, like your labs are normal, your labs are normal. And I was like, well, that's great, but I'm 34 years old and I can't walk up a flight of stairs, and I'm wheezing everywhere, and I sleep 2 hours a night, and my skin itches like, crazy. So that's wonderful that the lab looks normal, but not everything is normal, right? And the one thing that popped up on this test was calcium. It was like, I think it was really high in my blood test. And the doctor's like, this is, blood is very tightly regulated by the body, and especially electrolytes, certain minerals, right, that are conductive. And so he's like, this is, I don't know what he said, quite odd and not, insignificant. He's like, this, you don't want this to stay like this. And part of, one of the things, my research and reading, talking to experts, just digging in anywhere I could. But one of the things that led back to was EMF, and now you're explaining in even more detail how potentially calcium could be affected. But I realized that 3 years ago, when I had moved into the apartment I was living in at that time, the Wi-Fi connection was in my bedroom. In fact, it was on the ledge of my platform bed. So I was sleeping with my Wi-Fi router that blasted to the entire apartment. It was like 3 feet from my head for 3 years. And now I didn't feel immediately worse when I moved in and started doing that. So I think that can be one of the tricky things about health, is like you don't always feel it right away. It's more an accumulation over a long period of time. You used the chocolate cake example earlier. Like that was one thing that always confused me with food. It's like I eat chocolate cake and I don't feel any different than if I ate a salad. Like really, now maybe I would, maybe that was just younger years in life, but more than anything, it's a compounding effect. So you can usually get away with doing something once, twice, probably even 10 times, but you do it day after day, month after month, year after year, and sometimes these things catch up with you. And it's hard because our minds work. They see the physical world in a linear way. So it's like, well, it didn't bother me today. It should be fine. But if it bothered you like 1% and you compound that over many years, it can really crush your health. And I have no doubt that I'm not saying that the Wi-Fi and the EMFs caused everything, but it literally, it happened around the same time the 5G rolled out. For a couple of years after 5G rolled out, and a couple of years after sleeping with my head directly next to a powerful Wi-Fi router, and then those blood calcium levels were off. So it was odd to see at the time, but it's making a little more sense in this conversation. So that's cool. So you said that like within a week or so you started noticing a little bit feeling a little better doing that. Did you do anything else, or do you have any other favorites aside from unplugging the Wi-Fi router at night?
So that was the big one. Be more conscientious with my phone. Like I always used to have that on in my pocket kind of thing. If I'm just hanging out at home, like I'll either put it on airplane mode or just like not keep it in my pocket, try to keep it at least 5 feet away from me. So between those two, those were the big things that we did at home. We went as far as we like just got rid of Wi-Fi at our house. We actually hardwired everything. So we took it even like a step further. So we've really tried to reduce that Wi-Fi exposure as much as possible, especially at home. So, recognizing that it's kind of everywhere. The big thing we said is like, hey, we're not going to be able to avoid this completely. But for the space that we can really control, we want to control it the best that we can. And again, especially at nighttime, we felt like that was the biggest change. So yeah, I mean, we eventually got our intermediate step. We used to just unplug the Wi-Fi box at night. We eventually got it's called a kill switch. It's literally just like you buy it for $20 on Amazon, but you plug it into your outlet and it's got a little remote clicker where you can turn whatever device is plugged into it on or off. So then we could, just as we were going to bed, just hit off and that would turn off the Wi-Fi box. And then eventually we hardwired the house so that we didn't have to have the Wi-Fi going all day.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, this is such a deep topic. We could do an entire 2-hour episode on just this. But the last thing I want to ask about is, have you come across any solutions for people who live in apartments or condos or nearby a lot of, other households and the signals come through? Like when I was living in that apartment in LA, I was getting 20, I could flip on search for Wi-Fi and I had 20 different networks that were, showing up. So have you heard of any interesting solutions for people in that type of situation?
Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff out there. So I haven't tried a bunch of it. So I've even seen like, protective sheets or like grounding mats and those kind of things. So I don't think there's like a perfect solution in that case. And the other thing that we've found to be extremely helpful is this idea of grounding. So it's literally getting your bare skin in contact with the natural earth surface. So like any electrical plug you see in the outlet, you have the 2 prongs and you got that third hole in the bottom. Like that third hole in the bottom thing it's a grounding plug. So within electricity in a building, it's always seen as really important to have a way to rebalance the electrical charges and have a way to dissipate any like excess electricity that's not supposed to be there into the earth. So again, whenever they're building buildings, they have a grounding system. Pretty much any plug in it has a grounding system. As human beings, again, we like shoes are in the grand scheme of things like a pretty new invention for human beings too. Like we literally just used to walk around barefoot all day, right? So we have this constant connection to the earth. And we don't usually think about it, but we are electroconductive beings. So that's why it's not a good idea for you to stick your finger in the toaster when it's on, because you get electrocuted, because our bodies actually pass electricity really easily. And electricity at its core is this flow of electrons, right? So the Earth again is actually just the mass that it has, and also the characteristics that it has. It's actually a very electrical entity as well. And so touching your bare skin to an Earth surface is actually a super easy way to ground yourself electrically. So if you're in excess electrons, then it's going to go down to you'll be able to have that back and forth with the Earth where you're going to be able to balance out, and vice versa. So I think in this like bath of artificial electromagnetic frequencies we have, I think a lot of our body's electrical systems get thrown off quite a bit. I think a lot of people are very depleted of electrons. And I think, again, there's a lot of things that get thrown off with that. And so literally being able to contact a natural Earth surface is a really easy way to hit the reset button on what your body's doing electrically on any given day. And the cool thing about electricity is it works really quickly, right? Like it doesn't take long for you to get electrocuted if you stick your finger in the toaster. It doesn't take a whole lot of time for there to be a back and forth to get a reset electrically if you can get to a good grounding. Just anything that's good at grounding. And again, the natural Earth surface is probably one of the biggest resources that we have that we never take advantage of. Like most people don't spend a whole lot of time outside. Even for the people that do, we usually got rubber soled shoes on, which are like one of the greatest insulators on Earth, where there's no back and forth in terms of being able to ground electrically. So I think it's important for everyone to be able to. And again, when I first heard about this, I mean, man, it sounds like so woo, like, touch the natural, like get grounded to the earth, man. But again, the more that you recognize that the human body does run on electrons, like electrons are the energy currency of the body. We run our whole energy system off something called the electron transport chain. Our nervous system is literally bioelectric wires. We're sending electrical signals. It's called an electrical potential. Like we need to step into this realm more, because we always get talked about like we're just these like gasoline robots or something like that, where if you just put some gas in the tank, you're going to run, and then just like keep eating the right gas and you're going to be good to go. So of course we need to eat food, but there's a huge electrical component to the human body, and understanding some of those basics of how electricity works is super important. So yeah, I think if we're completely bathed in these artificial electrical frequencies, it's even more important for you to be able to hit that reset button. So I don't think in that case, like short of building like a lead box around your bed or something like that, it's very hard to block an incoming electromagnetic frequency. Like it literally goes through brick, it goes through wall, like it really penetrates a lot. So for you to be able to build a bubble where no electromagnetic frequencies coming in, I don't think it's very realistic. And then even if you did do that, the second you wanted to leave your house, you'd be back in it, kind of thing. So I think more so of recognizing like, hey, it's probably even more important for me to be able to hit the reset button on this. I think would be more of my focus in that situation. And so again, grounding was one of those things that just sounded like such BS when I first heard about it. And I was just like, the more I did it, the more I was just shocked. And then the more I started thinking about the science and like how the human body works, like it has started to make more and more sense over time, to the point now where I'm like, why the hell is more people not talking about this or using this? Like, again, I was taking like thousands of dollars worth of supplements, and I could have stepped outside and put my feet on the ground and probably got more benefit than all those supplements combined. So from that perspective, there's a bunch of products out there. I feel like I'm pretty hesitant on a lot of them, and I've heard of like these grounding mats and everything, but then I've also heard like if you're kind of around dirty electricity, or if the building isn't electrically wired perfectly, then you can start to kind of get like a negative electrical signal through the grounding mat kind of thing. So I don't know. I haven't really played around with it or tried it too much. I know there's a bunch of different things out there. But again, I think just at least to be having this conversation of like, hey, this matters, and what do we do next about it? I think that's a really cool place to start.
Yeah. I love it. I totally agree. I've looked into it myself. I've found a couple of products that seem to make sense and I like, but it is overwhelming and needs a deep dive too. So, I'll probably dedicate future episodes to it, but I love that you can admit, like, hey, I don't know, or it's a little new area. But the grounding thing, like that, that is just, it makes tons of sense. The way you talk about our body's electrical, every electrical wiring in a building has grounding so that the building doesn't start on fire from haywire electricity. So we can use our bodies connected to earth to do that. I mean, makes sense. What I like about that one too is like, what's the downside? It gets me outside. I spend a little more time outside. Like that's pretty painless. And I never knew it could work as quickly as you described, but that also does make sense because electricity moves pretty quickly. So I like it too because it's more accessible. Person could probably start with just 5 minutes, get barefoot or walk through the grass or something like that. Beach if you live by one, and see how you go. So, and I also love anything that's not fear-based because, like I was talking earlier about some of the early EMF people who are aware of it, but it's fear-based or conspiracy-based, and that people's ears shut off to that. That gets old. That's also not a good energy. So to take this approach with grounding, like, hey, there's, I'm going to have exposure, but also my body's made to, move electricity, and the earth is a healing, helpful thing to connect with, and I can keep resetting, I can keep recharging, and helping my body deal with some of the powerful technology factors that can affect physical health. Like, I love it. It's a more positive way to approach it. So very cool. And really, you give a lot of different suggestions in this episode, so I appreciate it because this is great. People can pick they can just pick the one thing that works for them, that sounds good to them, that they want to try, and then go from there. And the beautiful thing is, you get one, then it becomes motivating, or it opens your eyes. You're like, oh, well, if that worked, or I feel a little better, let me try this one. And that's when people get momentum. They start stacking them, and you really can build this health positive feedback loop versus health negative, health deteriorating feedback loop that most people are in. And I really, that's really like the message I want to get out there. It's like it's not. Yeah, I like what you said. It may be common, but it's not normal to feel so tired and fatigued and stressed and upset and anxious. And we really can, be energetic and happy and calm and loving and enjoying life. And I really think there's something to what you said, like people's passions start to come alive when they feel good. When you don't have any energy, you're more in survival mode. You're like, just get through the day. Maybe the next holiday in a few months, I can enjoy, half the day or something. And people don't even realize their passions, talents, desires are really hidden, and you need, full energy and good health to really let that shine through. And to me, that's the kind of world I want to live in. When everyone is connected with that, like, it's just fun. You're around people who are giving their gifts, they're inspiring, they're making life interesting, their personality shines through. And it's kind of sad that all sounds like a little ridiculous. Like, as I say it, if that sounds like, oh yeah, that would be nice, but that's not reality. Like, why not? And some of these simple tools that you shared can move us that direction. So I appreciate everything you shared, and you really broke down some complex topics, or topics everyone's heard about, but again, maybe they feel the same way you did, like, oh, this is woo woo, or what is this nonsense? And I think it's really helpful the way you broke it down and tied it back to what you've learned and studied and what you understand about health in the human body. So I know listeners are gonna love it. Is there anything else you'd like to say in closing before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think just to echo your sentiment, I really do see a better way for just humanity moving forward. And I think that really does start at a very foundational level of each human being needing to feel good. A lot of times it's painted as this picture where it has to be so complicated. There has to be a billion different things, or you do have to buy like $1,000 worth of supplements. And what I'm finding for myself more and more is, if we understand some of those foundational things, it doesn't have to be super complicated. Like, you can take anything as far as you want to go. And if you're noticing cool things within it, if you want to get complicated with it, you can. But I think just dialing it back a little bit and saying like, hey, here's the players in the game. Here's what I'm going to focus on now. There really is ways to take steps forward one at a time, and that is attainable.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree. Thanks again for coming on. I really enjoyed the conversation and appreciate it.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me.
Hey there. I hope you enjoyed this episode and that you feel you're walking away wiser than before. I want to bring you even better episodes in the future. One way you can make sure that happens is by rating this podcast. The more of you who rate this podcast positively, the better guests I can bring you. Since you and I both know you're not going to do this later, I'll walk you through the 10-second process right now. All you have to do is follow along. Take out your phone and unlock it. Open up Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever app you listen on, and search for Wiser Than Before Podcast and click on the show. In Apple Podcasts, you have to scroll down towards the bottom, past the most recent episodes. When you get to the ratings and reviews section, click on the blank stars to rate. In Spotify, beneath the logo and name of the show, you'll see 3 horizontal dots. They're just to the right of the bell and settings icons. Click those 3 dots, and the second option is to rate the show. Hit the blank stars and fill them in. All done. You can cross that off your to-do list and start looking forward to even better episodes in the future. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week, even wiser than before.